So, Donald Trump is now the 45th president of the United States. What does it mean to the United States? What does it mean to the world? Specifically, what does it mean to the LGBT community? I'm always happy to welcome back Kate Kendell, our guest today, Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights.
How are you, David?
Well, day 3 of the Donald Trump administration as we tape this. By the time this airs, it'll be a week in. What horrors are we needing to gird our loins for?
I'm not even sure we can imagine what those horrors might be. I absolutely worry about a rollback of protections for trans students. I worry about him actually creating a Muslim registry. I worry about him stripping these deferred action for childhood arrivals, these DACA young people who were brought here as children by their parents who were undocumented, stripping protections from them. The damage he could do, particularly to the most vulnerable in this country, is really incalculable and only limited by our own resistance.
Right. You know, I don't assume anything anymore in the news of alternate facts and fake news. So for those people who may not be aware of your history, tell us how long you've been in this movement and what does the National Center for Lesbian Rights do? Why are you here?
Well, NCLR was founded in 1977. I was a junior in high school, had no idea the organization existed for most of my early adult life. I came to NCLR as legal director in 1994, and I've been executive director since 1996. So I'm coming into 21 years specifically doing LGBT civil rights advocacy.
And with no exaggeration or hyperbole or trying to butter you up, you are one of the foremost legal authorities on LGBT civil rights in the world. You've been on the forefront of many battles. You helped us get marriage equality. Many, many extraordinarily significant moments in your life and the life of our community. And what I want to talk about is something you said on your Facebook feed from the Women's March in Washington. It's a very simple statement. You said something to the effect of, I've lived an incredible life, and this was one of, if not the most significant moments in your life. You're not someone who's really prone to exaggeration without meaning it. Tell me why you say that.
Oh, I totally meant it. I, like so many, have worked hard to overcome a sense of despondency that I felt when Trump won in November. I was concerned, like everyone has been, about rollbacks, about attacks on the most vulnerable, and while I felt a very strong commitment to resist and to fight back, you know, we all were questioning, well, how many of us are there? You know, what would it take? I mean, what does it take to fight back against the entire apparatus of government that seems arrayed against you? Well, I'll tell you what. In D.C., for that march, it had to be very close to 1 million men and women.
Yeah, I mean, many sources of news are calling it the largest march ever in the history of the United States.
I've never seen anything like it, and I've been doing street activism and been to rallies and marches and protests for most of my adult life. It was exhilarating. And the sense of unity, the sense of purpose, and the purpose is simple. I mean, yes, there are disparate issues that all people care about who were there, all over the country, all over the world marching, but the central value is we will not allow you to stigmatize and dehumanize the most vulnerable in any community. That was the core.
Yeah. You know, my friend and mentor, Anthony Turney, also a great leader in the LGBT community, executive director of the Names Project, openly gay member of the Episcopal clergy, always used to say when things were bad, it's an ill wind that doesn't blow someone some good. Is the Trump administration going to be good for the movement?
You know, that's a really...
You know what I mean.
I do. I know exactly what you mean. And it's like asking the question back in the 80s, you know, was HIV and AIDS good for the movement? I mean, the damage done and the lives lost during the AIDS crisis it's a mortal scar on our community forever. But what it did do was it forced us to understand no one was going to do this for us. Government was not only doing nothing to help, as dozens, hundreds, thousands of gay men were dying. The government actually mocked the fact that gay men were dying. So what did we do as a community? We built an entire apparatus to address the problem, force the government to address it, and start to save the lives.
Yeah, you know, Armistead Maupin once said or in the midst of the AIDS epidemic that someone once said to him, boy, if every gay person turned purple for a day, you'd be stunned by how many there were. And AIDS actually showed the world how many gay people there were. Do you think that the Trump administration, and Donald Trump specifically, whether he pretends to acknowledge the numbers or not, is impacted by the size of the protest marches that followed in less than 24 hours after his inauguration?
Trump is a lost cause. Trump is an irredeemable bully, narcissist, and I think, my opinion, sociopath. He is a lost cause. He will make up his own facts regardless of the actual facts. He will make up his own reality. He will make up his own lies to counter the actual facts. But I do think members of Congress, some of his cabinet, they all have to have taken notice that what has been unleashed can easily swamp you and take you out just as much as it can be used to repel the worst that the Trump administration might do. I do feel like that message has been really clearly sent.
So how do we keep the momentum going? I saw an article in The Guardian, I believe it was Saturday while the march was still going on, you know, this is terrific, but this has the danger of becoming the Occupy movement. This has the danger of becoming Black Lives Matter, something with a lot of force and fury and passion that doesn't actually end up changing hearts, minds, and legislation. How do we keep that energy going?
Well, you know, I heard somebody use both of those examples earlier. And yes, I mean, Occupy, I think, definitely made a mark. And it actually, I think Occupy had a lot to do with why we had 3 million people show up worldwide. Occupy galvanized younger people to engage and recognize that a street movement could be catalyzed into something bigger. And yes, it didn't achieve any long-term policy changes, but it made people have a sense of agency. And Black Lives Matter, oh my gosh, Black Lives Matter has changed the race conversation in this country and has highlighted the marginalization of particularly poor Black folks and men of color. So I think history will, as history writes the story, will be that the Black Lives Matter movement especially made a huge impact. And I actually think it is way too soon to begin suggesting right on the heels of people coming out and marching, well, what are you going to do next? It's like, what have you done for me lately? There is no doubt in my mind that the people who showed up didn't just want to march. They want to act. And now that we know we are in the company of millions, the actions are going to be waking up every single day and saying, how do you resist? Is it phone calls to Congress members? Is it getting trained as a lawyer to show up at ICE hearings with folks who are targeted as Muslim or other immigrants? I think it's incumbent upon us as folks who are in more leadership positions or in more formal organizations to create essentially the resistance playbook. This is the roadmap of the multiple things you can do that we will need done day in and day out. And I think we can be confident that we have a resistance army that will execute on that plan. You
know, before the camera started rolling, we were chatting and you said that this is an existential moment. You know, this is different from Bush 1, Bush 2, Reagan. How is it different? I mean, you know, that words are important, at least they used to be. And nowadays I begin to wonder, so actually in the last 2 months, getting over the despondency you talked about, I've been trying to find words that are accurate. And to hear you say that Donald Trump is an existential threat, that's a big deal. What do you mean about that?
I mean, look, the ubiquity and range of the power he possesses, the incompetence that he's already demonstrated and of his cabinet, and yet the power that they have to do incalculable damage. You put all that together, that is a threat to the existence of not just civil society, but so many of the values that we say we stand for. And I have been very worried that people didn't appreciate the magnitude of the threat. Not saying that I know anything more than anybody else, but you know, we're not used to being in a nation that is under such severe threat. Well, all of those concerns are no longer present. I feel like this is a new day. people understand life as we knew it is over for some period of time. Let's hope it's short. Let's hope it's 4 years. Maybe it's even 2. So what are you going to do every day to maintain a commitment to values and to keep this nation the best that it can be, even in the hands of a tyrant?
Are you more scared or more angry?
You know, neither of those terms is exactly where I'm at right now. Where I am right now is resolute. It's like, I truly do, and I don't want to engage in hyperbole, but, you know, and I don't believe it's going to come to this, but I actually really do feel over my dead body. And I don't think I'm the only one. I am willing to make whatever sacrifice is necessary to make sure that the worst that this administration plans does not come to pass. And I think I'm joined by millions throughout the world, and certainly millions in this country.
We've been speaking with Kate Kendell. In the next half of this interview, we're going to talk about how to turn that resoluteness into action. What can we all do in the midst of the next 4 years and the Donald Trump administration? We'll be right back. Continuing conversation with Kate Kendell, Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, the LGBT community in the age of Trump. So, Kate, how do we cope as members of the community for the next 4 years or 2 years or maybe less? And I'd like to talk about that too.
I've heard so many different stories about how people have responded to the election in ways that they never thought they would. My own way of coping, again, never thought I would. I've always been a political junkie. I've always been a news junkie. You know, NPR, the New York Times, you know, always on, whether I'm cooking in the kitchen, driving in the car. I've actually stopped. I mean, I want to stay informed because I do think it's important for a good citizen to stay informed about what's going on. But it's much less. And instead, I find I'm listening to hip hop.
Well,
or all sorts of music, and it does feel like. And even during the day, I never used to have music in my office. I got a Bluetooth speaker for Christmas, and it's actually helping.
You know that's very that's very funny. I didn't watch TV for weeks, actually almost 2 months, and I realized I have a TV show. I run a PR business. It's kind of my business. But all kidding aside, I suddenly realized that I was angry at the media. I was angry at quote-unquote legit news sources that told me everything was fine. And I believe, and I want to know if you believe, that things like the Nate Silver columns and the New York Times and all the mainstream media saying Hillary's got it in the bag, did that actually hurt her chances? Did it push down the vote?
Well, I think it might have suppressed the vote because people didn't realize how likely it was that Trump's chances were as good as they were. But given that every single poll got it wrong, I think what it really meant, none of the models took account of was turnout on the Republican side. That's what swamped us. And of course, with a huge assist from Russia and the FBI. Those are the criminal actions that that I think had people who were undecided, it pushed them to just stay home. People who were undecided, it pushed them to Trump. Feeding into this sense that Hillary couldn't be trusted, which is mostly made up and a complete web of nefarious, unsubstantiated stories. But nevertheless, we understood that was the narrative. There has to be a way to push back on it. I think she was making some real progress and momentum was definitely going in her favor. And then, boom, you've got Russia, the hack, the FBI complicit in it, and then Trump's obviously resurgence that we didn't really see. So I think altogether, everyone should do a little bit of self-reflection about how this happened. And I feel like for the LGBT community or for all progressive communities specifically, I feel like what we have to do is understand that we need to reach out across difference. We do this very well. For those of us who are progressives, we reach out across race. We reach out across sexual orientation and gender identity. We understand that we reach out around documented status. We understand we're all in this together. These are progressive values of inclusion and dignity.
Right.
But we kind of draw the line at conservative Republicans, and we just can't do that.
All right, well, so do you say that as a, kumbaya Californian, or because it's the right thing to do? I mean, as I told you before this broadcast started, I've probably, severed the relationship with my brother and sister-in-law over this election, which is painful. I think it's painful for them, too, but the idea that politics is now pulling apart families in a way without exaggeration, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia, capital of the Confederacy, hasn't happened since the American Civil War.
Yep.
How do you reach across that divide? I mean, on a personal level, for me, it's hard to pick up the phone or even write something.
Look, if real pain has been done, if you've had family members who have denied you dignity or denied your humanity, I'm not saying step back into that trauma again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying as a movement,
Mm-hmm.
we need to be willing to have those hard conversations for those of us who feel like we can. There are some members of my family that, I'm not going to have that conversation with, but it's almost easier to have it with, a room full of strangers. Would I go and speak at a church group who may actually be opposed to my existence as a lesbian?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. If I were invited and I felt like there was some way to reconcile, because I think the divisions are so intense at this point. You've got the Republican Tea Party that is no compromise, no how, that took the Republican Party hostage and I think led to the ascendancy of Donald Trump. We also have some very extreme elements in the Democratic
Mm-hmm.
Party and in progressive politics. And that's important because it does push a progressive agenda. But at some point, the way you move politics forward or good policy forward or you protect the most number is you come to some sort of a compromise. And the no compromise position of far-right Republicans led to Trump. We can't fall trap to the same thing.
Right. For years, after I moved, and I've been in San Francisco for 30 years, I said that I'm a screaming moderate because I really thought that, that's where, ships only float when they're kind of on an even keel. Do you think that some of the criticism the Trump supporters have leveled against, quote unquote, the progressive community are correct, that we are pointy-headed, intellectual, elitist snobs and think they're a bunch of crackers?
I think there are definitely folks who feel that they have a sort of intellectual superiority.
Right, and I'm being ironic on both sides of that.
But you're right, and if you think that someone won't engage with you because they think they're smarter than you, that is not a basis for a real conversation. In the political world, I just think there are compromises that are going to need to be made. Now, some compromises we would never make. We're not going to talk to the KKK, but in order to make policy work in a wildly diverse society, to make the gains that protect the most, we may have to make some compromises and have conversations with people we would otherwise find odious. Van Jones, for example. Van Jones is working with Newt Gingrich, who is as repellent a figure as I could imagine other than maybe our newly elected president. And yet they are working together on opioid addiction. And that's a model for the kind of conversation. It doesn't mean we have to agree with anything else they do, but if we can find common ground to advance gains that protect the most vulnerable. Look, I feel like as someone who runs an organization committed to protecting the LGBT community, I have to be willing to have that conversation.
We've only got a couple minutes left. I want to ask two more questions. One is, what specifically are you most concerned about as far as if there was one big hulking thing that this administration can do that will damage our community, what are you most concerned about? And the second is, do you think that Donald Trump will serve out his 4 years?
Wow. First question. Okay, I'm going to cheat just a little bit.
Fine.
I'm worried about transgender folks and I'm worried about immigrants. Those are the two populations that I think could be most readily targeted and are going to need both allyship and fierce partnerships. I think it's unlikely he's going to last 4 years. I think he's so reckless that something is going to be his undoing, and if his popularity numbers stay in the 30s, I mean, he's in no honeymoon period because he's already tanking. If those numbers stay low, you're going to have a lot of Republicans who are going to look around and say, boy, this is not going to work. And I think he's going to do something that will be an impeachable action.
Well, good. You got to my next question. For those civic, junkies like me, is it possible to impeach a president for something he has done before taking office?
Oh, wow. Well, if he's indicted.
Right. So if a president is indicted for something that he did before he was president, impeachable offenses an impeachment can be brought.
I think that's right. I mean, I don't know for sure, and there might be viewers who are like, no way, they can't do that. So I don't know the answer for sure, but I think so. I mean, otherwise, that's a wide swath of wrongdoing that one could engage in and not be held accountable for.
We've got 2 minutes left, and I do want to talk a little bit about the legal landscape.
Yep.
Because a lot of people are concerned, I think there are Republicans of conscience, that are concerned about the quality of the man that is Donald Trump. And I don't mean this to, just say negative things about a human being, but I have a hard time getting past the person that is Donald Trump and the things he has said about many people, not just members of the LGBT community.
Yeah, we've been the least of his targets.
Yeah. What do you think is the most likely thing that a Donald Trump would do that would lead to his being removed from office?
I think there's going to be some sort of financial dealing. It'll be either financial dealing, or it will be, given that he's not disclosing his tax returns, finding some sort of maybe bordering on treasonous relationship with Russia. Something like that could easily occur, because he thinks he is imperious. He really thinks the rules don't apply to him. And why should he think they do? He engaged in abhorrent behavior throughout the entire campaign and still won. And he's like a petulant child who, if there's no consequence for bad behavior, they're going to continue engaging in bad behavior. He has no impulse control, and so I think he's likely to be his own undoing.
10 seconds left. Advice to the LGBT community during whatever the length of time is of the Trump administration.
Wake up every day and ask what you can do. What can you do to fight back? And when you get to Friday and you head into your weekend, you tick off that list and you're part of keeping this country safe for all of us.
Thank you, Kate. It's always a pleasure.
Love being here.
We've been speaking with Kate Kendell, Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, about what bodes for the next 4 years, or whatever the length of term is, for the Trump administration, for the LGBT community and the world. Kate, please come back at any time during the next tenure of his administration. Hi, I'm David Perry. You've been watching 10%. We'll see you next week.